what we have, one of the things we have now that we never had before was we have people masking now for colds and flus, right? Never had anything like that before. Now we have it. We've got, and some colleges are saying, oh, let's put those masks on now for the flu season. What the heck? It's just good for you. It used to be that every now and then we'd see an Asian person walking by with a mask and we'd say, okay, it's kind of a cultural thing and they're just kind of that way. And, but now it's commonplace, and then it's cool to be Howard Hughes and to just be scared of germs. And it's also what's become commonplace in our world right now. Well, wearing a mask is not so weird anymore if you want to, quote unquote, prevent a cold or the flu, even though we know masks are completely useless in these things. But now people are doing that, and people are also using these hand sanitizers still and carrying around with them, and wiping their hands constantly with this carcinogenic crap that they're putting on their bodies and their hands because they think that they're actually killing bad germs.
That the creation will kill you. They've been convinced that the creation will kill you.
Yeah, that the creation will kill you. Exactly. It's a completely different way of thinking. If you're looking at the whole concept of germ theory versus what we now call terrain theory. Terrain theory is everything essentially that God has given you and ways to live your life according to natural science and natural biology. And it's also understanding that these organisms that we call bacteria, and for the most part viruses, we get into this thing all the time about viruses exist or not. Viruses do not exist for the purposes of what they are proclaimed to do.
That's well said. What you just said was well said, because what happened was too many people are going all the way saying they don't exist at all, which is always why I said they don't exist as described. Some of the best medical minds I've ever met will tell you over and over that some of the heroes, I think it was Rife or someone else, had a microscope that looked at living things and they identified things they called viruses.
Well, and that's called the dark field microscopy.
Right.
Okay, which is the big difference between the germ theory analysis.
Fortune talks about this.
Well, my dear friend, Dr. Marisel Arce, here in Mount Vernon, New York, she has a dark field microscope. She's a naturopath, and there are lots of doctors that have dark field microscopes now. I mean, doctors are investing in it. I would love to at some point.
What does it cost? Do you have any idea what a dark field microscope costs somebody?
Oh, they're upwards of $50,000-$60,000.
Oh, wow.
If you get the whole setup with the computer system and everything like that, and doctors can get it on lease and pay it off or whatever, but she's got it and she's doing the analysis right now. And the difference, folks, and I write about this in the new book as well, between dark field microscopy and electron microscopy is everything. It is everything. Germ theory germ theory is essentially one big ghost story. You have to be scared of everybody sneezing, everybody coughing, of door handles, of toilet seats, because what's going to happen is there's something on there that's going to crawl into your skin, crawl up your nose, and it could potentially kill you. Okay, something that isn't already part of nature, and something that, there are opportunist germs out there that are waiting to just, take over your body and kill you. Terrain theory is all about, well, wait a minute now, maybe these microorganisms are just part of the natural environment, and it says that they spontaneously emerge from within you, okay? There was a scientist called Pierre-Antoine Duchamp, who was a predecessor, contemporary to Louis Pasteur, who was a criminal and was also a plagiarist and was also working for the pharma lackeys of the time to create the germ theory. And Duchamp came up with all of these terrain theory concepts, way back in the mid 1800s, while Pasteur was trying to get his germ theory, postulates begun. Essentially, Pasteur said, one germ, one organism, one disease. Okay, that's essentially it. It's the basis of Koch's postulates, which we talked about last time, Crow.
Yep.
All right, which essentially say that if you don't have the germ, you don't have the disease, and these things you get attacked from somebody who has it, and they're all contagious There's been plenty of studies on contagion which show that that's complete nonsense. There have been studies, from Rosenau back in the early 1900s where you could eat somebody's sputum that has tuberculosis or has all these different nasty kinds of things, and nothing happens to you. All right. So contagion is essentially a myth. There is a reason why people get sick in groups. All right. It has to do more with the energy of healing and the energy of clearing things out of your body, clearing toxicity out, which I talk about in the new book as well. Very much in line with what we were just talking about previously, with just getting the good vibes running through you. Listen, as soon as you have good energy running through you, as soon as you release your body's life force, you're going to spit crap out of you. You might perceive that as disease, but your symptoms are your cure, right? When you're coughing stuff out and you're spitting stuff out through every orifice, that is a good thing. You want to get rid of this crap that's in your body. And this is what the terrain theory talks about, purifying the body back to its, back to homeostasis. All right. And now we talked about the microscopes. Dr. Arce in Mount Vernon, if you've been to see her, she would prick your finger and take a look at your blood. And terrain theory wants to look at how your body is functioning in life. So you see things with the crystal lenses of the dark field microscopy, which you do not see happening.
Living things, not this death-based other way.
Yeah, as you say, Crow, the death-based reality. This particular way of looking at your body is life-based, and you were looking at the most fascinating stuff. I've been there to her. I've always wanted to see something under dark field, and I finally had the opportunity. And actually, Dr. Arce and her family, you know how we met? Her mother was a college professor in Queens when my book first came out, in the 2005-2006 era. And she bought, on her own expense, her own dime, dozens of copies of my book to hand out to her biology class.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, Marizelle was, in college and studying to be a naturopath. And so, we've known them for a long time. And she became a brilliant naturopathic doctor and now is using this dark field microscopy to analyze people's state of health. That's what it does. So it looks at your blood in a state of health. And by looking at the formation of the different aspects of the blood, you are able to see by the organisms that are being created from the microzyma, from the somatids in your blood, okay? We're able to see what organisms are being produced in order to clean up your environment. And by doing that, doctors like Dr. Arce know what supplements to give you, what antioxidants to give you in order to clean up the environment so that your disease process goes away. You see, totally different from looking at an electron microscope, which is germ theory, which is, okay, so, we talked about how viruses really do exist, but they're not really doing what people think they're doing. And we're calling them viruses, but they're not alive, ladies and gentlemen. They do not eat, they do not breathe, they do not reproduce, okay? They do not follow any of the laws of what's defined as life. They don't respire, they don't eat, they don't excrete, they don't reproduce. None of those things do they do. So essentially, what we're calling viruses, when you look at them under the electron microscope, because everything when you look at under the electron microscope has to be, as Crow said, dead, right? You take a tissue sample. I was one of the first students back in the 70s to work on the only electron microscope that was in a college at the time, at Adelphi University on Long Island in New York. And myself and Dr. Moon, who was running the class at that time, trained us all how to use the electron microscope and look at different tissue samples. And it took hours to get the tissue sample dead, to dehydrate it, to stain it with the proper stains in order to get it to be, you have to really kill this stuff in order to look at it under the electron microscope. Now you're looking at it at fantastic, magnifications, but it's all dead. You're looking at a snapshot of something which may have changed 2 seconds afterwards and may have been completely different 2 seconds before. And when you're looking at what what they're looking at when they see these so-called viruses under an electron microscopic slide is very common in the disease process. Cells destroy themselves by what they have inside them called lysosomes. Now, a lysosome is an organelle which is inside the cell, and it is called the suicide sac. Any of you guys ever hear that one before? Suicide sac inside a cell?
Yeah, I have heard it. Yeah.
Okay, well, you've heard it because your dad, right? Your dad was a biologist. So, the suicide sac, once the cell gets too toxic, will release the enzymes and essentially blow the cell up. It explodes. Boom. All right? Every cell membrane is made up of a lipid polymer, like barrier. Okay, that's what a cell membrane is all about. It's primarily lipids. And I've said this before on your shows. If you take your car windshield and smash it, you get little bitty pieces of the safety glass breaking all over the place. That's exactly what you get when a cell membrane explodes, because the cell explodes. You get these little tiny pieces of cell membrane, and when you look at a slide that has under an electron microscope, and you're looking at all these little things that the researchers are saying, well, look at that. Here's a diseased cell, and these are the viruses. They must be causing it. Guess what? You're just looking at a process of cell death. You're looking at artifacts of a cell explosion that has just, that's just there. These pieces of cell membrane, what you're calling viruses, okay, we'll call them viruses. They could have some purpose. The body always reabsorbs and does different things with them, but they're certainly not attaching to your cell in any way, shape, or form and causing disease. How can they? It's never been proven that these particles that they're looking at under an electron microscope, dead, that they do anything. It's not proven that they know how to get through a cell membrane. It's not proven that they know how to attach to DNA and change your DNA and take over the cell and make you sick.
That's what they're showing. They're showing animations of exactly what you just said.
They're showing animations.
Right.
It's not real.
It injects another cell with its DNA and hijacks it. That's what they're showing on TV.
Okay, so that's never been proven scientifically, ever.
There it is.
They have never seen an electron micrograph of a virus ever doing that. And even if they did, and they're fudging it somehow, it could be disputed. I've never seen anything like that, by the way. And everything you're seeing is an animation, correct? Have you ever seen an electron microscopic picture?
I've seen them online, supposedly, but I mean, it begs the question. So remember the little picture of the round COVID thing that was going to kill us all? What was that?
Right.
Was that
was
just
an animation?
That was an artist's rendering? There is nothing that looks like that.
These are all animations, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, there is nothing that any researcher has seen. To date, when the AIDS scam came out back in the 80s into the 90s, there was never one keynote study to prove that HIV caused AIDS. Not one. Dr. Duesberg talked about this when he was alive. They ruined his career because he was a whistleblower on it, right? But he was right. And there were so many virologists saying it at the time, saying that there are no studies showing that this HIV virus is doing anything that you're saying that it's doing. But still, the medical cartel, the media, which is controlled by them because they pay their bills and they pay their salaries, right? They just go on with these rants about how the virus goes into the cell and it takes over your body. That's never been proven in any case. Even with COVID, it's never been proven. The virus has never been isolated for the culprit, let's say.
Why the hell hasn't that been to a court somewhere? It's like the whole system must have been geared up.
It's never been proven. We talked in the first hour about mind control. This is a perfect example of it. Right?
Someone should go to court and simply say, can you please show me the isolated virus here?
Yeah, it's tough to get that in court because you have to have damage proven. And this argument has come up before in courts, but when it comes up, it gets suppressed. Court cases get settled. It has come up.
Yeah.
Lawyers have brought up the fact that, Your Honor, it hasn't even been proven that we even have an isolated virus here causing this issue. Of course it hasn't been proven. How did they create this stupid pandemic? They created it through panic.
And TV.
Yeah, they completely created it through the media. It's the same way they created AIDS. I call COVID refangled AIDS. You know, they knew how to do it with AIDS. They just did it better with COVID.
Fortune says almost identically what you just said. Fortune says almost an identical version.
Well, what did they do? They had a press conference for AIDS. They had press conferences for COVID. You know, for COVID, it was back in January 2020. Oh, we got something coming. It's coming. Wait for it. Here it comes. Here it comes. And then bingo. Next thing you know, we have the first case. Bing! It showed up in Oregon or whatever the hell it is, right? And then it's all over the news. People start panicking. Blah, 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 blah. You create panic everywhere. Even those scientists in hospitals that are empty, right? We talked about that last hour. They're all scratching their head and saying, what the hell are you talking about? Nothing is really happening. But you see it going all over. Every television said, everywhere they just blast it out. Panic starts every place. Then you start creating inaccurate testing protocols. All right. Oh, get tested for these COVID tests. Don't test for anything. All right. I had to go into the hospital last April for kidney stone operations because I was sick, and the only way that they would treat me is if they stuck this stupid thing up my nose. Right. Let me tell you something. I've never been. As soon as they did that twice to me, because I had to have the stent put in and then the kidney stones removed, and then I had to have the stent taken out. The second time, they refused to do anything unless they stuck the stick up my nose, and they did that. The only time I've ever had COVID test. Never been sicker. I had a cough I could not get rid of for 3 months after they did that to me. All right. These tests are complete nonsense. What they're doing is they're putting stuff into you. They're not taking stuff or testing anything that comes out of you. All right.
Why can't you just spit in a damn petri dish for them or whatever the hell? It's ridiculous.
Exactly. It's all ridiculous and it's all random.
Yep.
And it's completely random whether you have it or not. I've never tested positive at any time.
Evil.
But, my daughter has tested positive, and then 2 hours later, she's tested negative. So, and you hear these kinds of stories all over the place. So you create these inaccurate testing protocols, and then you stimulate the contagion myths, and you get everybody all worked up about it. You could also introduce an airborne respiratory toxin, which they've been doing for years anyway, through chemtrails. You also create organized medical hospital cash incentives, right, to keep the disease diagnosis going. Because just like in polio, when polio was already gone when they introduced the Salk vaccine. This is in my book, folks. It was already at its lowest level for many different reasons. The vaccine came back in. Polio cases went right back up again, but they didn't diagnose polio anymore, did they? They diagnosed paralytic spinal meningitis. It couldn't be polio because the population had already been vaccinated for it. Same bullcrap happened with COVID. All right. You took respiratory illnesses have already been rampaging through our country because of respiratory toxins in our atmosphere for 15 years. The population is already ripe for it. There's thousands of people that get sick from colds and flus that have compromised immune systems, that are diabetic, that have all sorts of problems, spleen problems going on. They're not taking care of themselves. All right. And thousands of people die from flu each year. Right. All they did was replace the word flu with COVID, and they created a complete mass panic. And then just ride the bullshit wave, folks, and until you're discovered, right? Until you can't do it anymore. Until the Supreme Court has to lay down a ruling saying that guess what, it's unconstitutional to force anybody to get vaccinated.
If they do this time.
Well, they did.
I'm waiting to see how many. See, this is the thing.
I've been waiting for that ruling, by the way, for ever since I wrote my book for 22 years.
Any person that had their business closed was damaged. Any one of those people could have started a court case to demand it. But what you're pointing out is this is so all-encompassing. Even all these years later, like I just signed up to get Sky and Telescope magazine again. Not for the reasons you think. I'm interested in the technology and what's coming. They're very good at telling you what's happening in the sky. 90% of it is nonsense, but get this. They're now referencing sun work, where it's so interesting to see, wait for it, the sun's corona. This came out in an issue in 2020. You know how you do it? You get this special thing that blocks out the light of the sun. The only other time you can see the corona in this way is when an eclipse blocks out the light of the sun. Are you following along here? You can see the corona when you block the light. this is coming out in Sky and Telescope. And for me, I mean, I know everyone doesn't think like I do, but if it's sky clock related, I'm all in. I'm looking, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to see the metaphor or the correlation. And here's another thing for you. From the similar sources, I'm hearing that the 11th month, Count the Ways, is going to be a shoe drop month. In the same way I heard that monkeypox was coming, and it came on the 1st of August as predicted. It fell flat on its face. But there is a complete lunar eclipse on the 8th of the 11th month, November this year. So what I'm saying is
right around election day.
Yeah, so
how about that?
What I'm saying is that would be a good shoe drop time, but I'm not going to make the prediction. I'm just noting this is how I think about things. But you brought up a few things there. All the